in one sense, that's not a surprise, because the way this ceasefire emerged appears to have been a pronouncement by the US president, as opposed to a negotiated settlement between the parties. And it may have been more a case of wishful thinking, or I've spoken to them roughly, they kind of want to agree a ceasefire, but I'm going to just announce it here, rather than actually working out the end point to it. So it seems that there was an announcement that hadn't been properly solidified with the participants themselves. Now, this isn't necessarily unusual in the Middle East. You do get rounds of, if you like, breakdowns before you can get to a permanent ceasefire, but it also shows you the fragility of the situation, and this isn't as clear as at first seemed.
I'm guessing, from Donald Trump's point of view earlier, he would have seen this as a win and certainly something that he'd orchestrated.
Well, that looked to be the case when he announced it, because it's a bold statement. I have done this. Everyone's agreed. We're ending this conflict. And that would, of course, have sat in very well with his idea that he's a person who ends wars and doesn't start them. In his context, the bombing of Iran's nuclear facilities would have been the end to the war as far as he was concerned. But it appears that the protagonists have other ideas.
Is there any diplomatic solution here, do you think?
Well, this is where it gets very difficult, because the diplomatic solution obviously involves Iran giving up its nuclear program. And Iran does not want to give up its nuclear program because it wants to develop nuclear weapons. It's wanted to develop nuclear weapons for decades. So we start with the problem that we have a regime that doesn't want a diplomatic solution. So I think, Donald Trump's idea was that we'll force you into that if you're not prepared to negotiate it. We'll force you into it by destroying your nuclear program or damaging it very badly, and then promising further disruption if that doesn't happen. But the Iranians appear again to have other ideas and suggest that they're not willing to abandon their resistance, as they term it, and that they, will continue their attacks on Israel, which is obviously a proximate reason why the Israelis attack them, and that this, as a result, makes it very difficult to reach a diplomatic conclusion with this regime. And this is the point, isn't it? We have a regime that's the problem, ultimately. The cause of this is a regime. The symptom is a nuclear program, but it's a regime that is the heart in Iran of all the instability in the region, and that's what you have to wrestle with. It's very difficult to reach a diplomatic accord with that kind of regime.
Well, how weakened is that regime, do you think, right now?
Well, it's certainly been weakened. I mean, if you look at what the Israelis have done to the entire top rank of the military and the intelligence services, they've all been knocked out in various attacks. So it's weakened at the top level. Obviously, they haven't yet touched the political side of the regime. I would imagine this continues. That's the next goal. It will be, right, your military leadership has been taken out. We will now go for your political leadership. And then the question is, how much can the regime withstand internally before essentially collapsing from its own contradictions and inability to replace people with other quality people? So the regime is in a dangerous position, because if it continues to be intransigent, it runs a risk of being removed because of just attrition. And then, of course, the unknown is whether there will be a reaction on the ground. Iranians on the ground have literally seen the billions of pounds and dollars that the Iranian regime has wasted on nuclear programs as opposed to welfare go up in smoke. So, what's their reaction to this? If the regime now determines to return to that, are they going to tolerate it? Will a weakened regime be able to survive a popular uprising? All these are unclear moments right now.
Alan, aside to this, we know that the NATO summit's happening today. Donald Trump's going to be there. Sir Keir Starmer's going to be there. Feels very relevant in the context of what's happening. And they're expected to agree this increase in defence spending to 5% of GDP, but by 2035, which seems an incredibly long time away from where we are in the situation right now.
So you're right, of course, it is a long time, but it is, of course, difficult to go from the percentage we are at the moment to that level overnight. There does need to be an escalator process because otherwise you'll have to introduce swinging cuts into other services to do that. Well, I think perhaps the timeline could be accelerated, but you won't get it overnight. The reality is, of course, you then have to also stock your military, recruit your military, all the rest of it, to get to a position where you're actually effective. I think what's most important is that we do get the commitment from all NATO members to hit this level, because if you think about where we were even a very few short years away, when most NATO members weren't even paying 2%, this is quite a dramatic increase in spending.